And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Aviation Weather Outlook on this Tuesday, February 18th, 2025. And this outlook is for the midweek, Wednesday and Thursday. And the weather of concern, the storm track and the overall weather pattern has shifted out. We had for the longest time a very strong high pressure out over northwest Canada. That feature has weakened, and it's allowing for lows to come back up into the Gulf as well as up along the Alaska Peninsula, Aleutians, and impacting areas of the west coast. And this is going to be the trend now this week into the upcoming weekend. So we're going to have a little more active weather at times. There is going to be an area of low pressure, not especially strong, that's going to come up into the Gulf and pull back toward Prince William Sound Wednesday into Wednesday night. That's going to bring in some more moisture along areas of the Gulf Coast and Panhandle. And then a low that's south of the Alaska Peninsula has an inverted trough up here and through the west side of the state, and that moisture is pulling westward. But as of Tuesday, we still have some blizzard warnings around Norton Sound, winter storm warnings up around Anvik in the lower middle Yukon Valley, and a blizzard warning for St. Lawrence Island. Conditions should be improving, though, as we get into the day on Wednesday, especially once we get past the morning hours. And looking at IFR conditions, we find areas of IFR throughout the interior, upper portion of the Tanana Valley along the Alcan border, eastern Brooks Range, up along parts of the Alaska Range, and just on the other side of the Alaska Range, you have areas of IFR in the interior as well as along areas of Kotzebue Sound, pretty widespread out over the Gulf, back southwestward across the Alaska Peninsula and in toward the eastern Aleutians. For Wednesday afternoon into Thursday morning, similar conditions exist where we're expecting IFR conditions up here along the Gulf Coast as this front lifts northward with some more moisture, that low coming back toward Prince William Sound and weakening. We also find IFR conditions up here in the 40-mile Gold Country, the higher elevations, hills and small mountains north of Fairbanks, back up along the spine of the Brooks Range, and then down along the Kuskokwim, Bristol Bay areas extending inland up on the west side of the Alaska Range. By Thursday afternoon, this may not have enough IFR, especially along areas of the Gulf Coast, because there is going to be another front coming northward that's going to bring a renewed round of snow and rain across areas of the Panhandle, especially later in the day, Thursday night, and early Friday. So looking at the pass conditions on Wednesday, up there, Anatuvik Pass, MVFR becoming IFR. Same thing at Adigan Pass, MVFR becoming IFR. Lake Clark and Merrill along the west arm of the Alaska Range, generally IFR conditions expected Wednesday. Same thing, Rainy Pass. As we go up along Windy Pass, maybe MVFR just east of there. You get along the south entrance and heading more toward the east, IFR conditions. Isabel Pass, MVFR becoming IFR on Wednesday. Further east, Mentasta Pass should generally be within MVFR conditions, maybe some MVFR, VFR south of the south entrance, but to the north, IFR conditions will be found along and north of the north entrance there at Mentasta Pass on Wednesday. Tonita Pass starting out with IFR, maybe becoming MVFR there by midday afternoon. And then Portage Pass, generally the midsection east entrance of the pass will remain IFR on Wednesday, MVFR there toward the west entrance, and then Chilkoot and White starting out with some IFR conditions, and it should generally be MVFR during the daytime on Wednesday. So looking at the freezing line at the surface, Wednesday morning dips down into the lower Bering north of the Aleutians up to inland there of Bristol Bay just a bit, and then up through lower Cook Inlet and along the northern Gulf Coast and the outer areas of the Panhandle. Freezing levels do come up. We have this one low, so ahead of it 6,000 feet, but again, not very impressive when it comes to warmer air aloft. And so, but nevertheless, we have this other weak system coming back toward the north and west across the Gulf on Wednesday. That's going to spread some precipitation along the Panhandle heading west and northwestward. Icing threats on Wednesday, we could find some moderate icing along the Gulf Coast into areas of the Panhandle above 5,000 feet in those precipitation producing clouds. Also some upslope glide, and where there are IFR conditions, there could be above 4,000 feet up there and through the central Brooks Range north of the Yukon River, and then also an area down here along the lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula. Now the jet stream pattern, as we look at situation up around 300 millibars, 30,000 feet, we find kind of an anticyclonically curved jet max of 90 knots south of the Gulf in the North Pacific. Relatively light winds out over much of the mainland, with the exception of up further north as you get up toward Dead Horse, Kaktovik, on over toward the Mackenzie River. Again, though, at 30,000 feet, those are not strong winds, not like when we have with the bigger storm systems and fronts. There is some energy, there is some southwesterly flow coming out of the North Pacific in up toward the Gulf. This is what's going to eventually catch up and be the next frontal system that spreads more precipitation across the Panhandle later Thursday and into early Friday. We find easterly flow up here off the Cape Lisburne Peninsula back toward eastern Russia as high as 40 to 50 knots locally. And then at 3,000 feet, we can see that frontal system. This is the one that'll be lifting northward with more in the way of precipitation. Initially a weak low working back to the west like that Wednesday into Wednesday night, but further south, this low will have a front that does swing up into the Panhandle, especially Thursday afternoon, Thursday night, early Friday. That'll bring more in the way of some precipitation, snow and some rain. Strongest winds are coming off the west end here of the Brooks Range, the Cape Lisburne Peninsula around Cape Lisburne, Point Hope, out over the Chukchi Sea, and then here in eastern Russia around the Gulf of Anadyr. In those areas, winds upwards of 80 knots in some cases. And so, of course, the most turbulence will be found up here in the northwest, coming off the western Brooks Range, again around from about Point Lay down to Point Hope, back into eastern Russia, and then areas especially up around Gamble there at the St. Lawrence Island. And then along areas of the Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, there could be some moderate turbulence, 5,000 to 6,000 feet, and some of that extending down along the western Gulf and especially the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula through any of the gaps there with the flow that'll be coming in up ahead of that particular area of low pressure. But as I said, the weather pattern has finally shifted out. So this week, as we go into the weekend and even lingering into the next week, we're going to start to see more in the way of some lows coming up from the Gulf. And it's looking like by the weekend, the storm track will shift back more from the North Pacific out into the Aleutian, Aleutians and Bering Sea, which could begin to impact more of the west coast here as we go through the weekend into early next week. So stay tuned to later forecast, and as always, be sure to check the latest weather before heading out, and I wish you a safe flight.